everyone, it's Lindsay. So today I want to do an update on some of the books that I have been loving recently. As some of you may know, I have been working really hard to kind of diversify my reading this year. I read way too much fantasy last year, which really you can't read enough fantasy, but I like to read widely and I did not do that last year, so I have made myself a goal that I am going to be reading at least 5 books from 10 different genres, which was a mighty goal to set now that I am almost halfway through the year, but I'm doing pretty good. So let's go ahead and get into the books. So I have really been in a thrillery mood the past couple months and actually have 5 thrillers to talk about. The first one I will talk about is Broken Things. This is the only YA thriller on this list. I gave this a 4 out of 5 star and I found it pretty enjoyable. This follows 2 girls whose best friend was found murdered when they were younger, and now even though the murder was never solved, it was pretty much known around town that the 2 best friends and one of the girls' boyfriends were the ones who did the murdering. All 3 of the girls were like strangely obsessed with this one woman's book, and they kind of wrote their own fan fiction based on the book, and a lot of like eerie, mysterious parts of this book kept showing up around the girl's murder. So it was a really cool setup for the book. I think the thing that made me really enjoy this book the most was the characterization of the 2 girlfriend POVs. They were very distinct and I thought the voices were very well done. Both of the girls felt very different, felt very real and raw. They both had like, obviously it's very traumatic to have your best friend die, but they had their own life circumstances going on at home that I thought really gave them a lot of depth and complexity. The mystery, however, was a little bit run-of-the-mill. I think you might like it if you haven't read a ton of mysteries or aren't very familiar with mystery tropes. It was still good. I still found it really enjoyable. Again, I gave it a 4 out of 5 star, but it's not the most like mind-blowing mystery reveals that you'll ever read. I think the ending of this book, particularly the very last sentence, is one of the most brilliant book endings I've ever read. Which probably gave it a whole star in and of itself because I loved that. Moving on to one of my absolute new favorite books of all time, and that is I Know You Know. This book takes place in 2 different timelines. In the past, there were 3 little boys that were best friends. 2 get murdered and 1 boy who should have been murdered along with his best friends was actually saved because of circumstances. And then later, like I think 20 years in the future, the boy that survived has created a podcast to help kind of solve the mystery of his childhood friend's death. There has been somebody who has been arrested for the murders, but he thinks that that person is innocent, and he's doing this podcast to kind of crack the case wide open. So in this book, we follow that grown-up kid's perspective. We follow the mother of one of the murdered boys, and we follow the detective who was the first to find the boy's body and kind of like, you know, stuck with the case the whole way. I'm finding after reading Sadie and reading this that I really enjoy books that have a podcast element. Again, this lends itself really well to an audiobook read because it does feel like you're actually listening to a podcast. It's got, you know, multiple actors playing different roles and like, you know, people calling in and leaving emails and telling their story and interviews and things like that. So that was really great. But I think what makes this book one of my new favorite books of all time is that there is this just like slow unravel of characters. Like you have the author set these characters up in the beginning so that you make these like snap judgments about them and you're like, oh, that's a good guy. Oh, well, that person has secrets. Oh, well, I mean, that person has to be good because A, B, and C. And slowly, as the book progresses, those assumptions that you made start to break down, and it's like chapter by chapter by chapter you just see it like decimate, and I loved it. Oh my gosh, it was so great. Everyone has secrets, everyone has a past, everyone has a hidden agenda, everyone is an unreliable narrator, and I adored the twist at the end. I did not see it coming. I did give this book a 5 out of 5 star. However, I agree with like all of Goodreads that the ending was wrapped up way too fast. I did not like the ending. However, the book to me was unlike anything I had ever read, and was just the characterization and again that like slow decay of your heuristics, like your snap decisions of who these people were. That was just brilliant to me, and I loved it for that. Next, I went on a little bit of a Gillian Flynn kick. I was super in the mood for thrillers, and I've read almost all of her works except 2 books, so I wanted to read those, and I read both of those this month. And the first one was Dark Places. So this follows the sole survivor of the, I forget what it's called, it's like the Satanic Nebraska massacre or something. Basically what happened was, as a child, her entire family was massacred in this supposed satanic ritual by her older brother. Now we follow them like 20 years later. The brother is still in prison for this crime, and she's kind of been living off of the money that people have been giving her as donations, but now she's out of money, so she kind of starts like pimping herself out to like groups of private investigators and like just like people that at night like to just have a hobby and like try to put crimes together. She starts like going to these shows and selling memorabilia just to make money for these people that are trying to prove her brother is actually innocent. This might be the darkest book I have ever read. I read it all in one sitting, and I'm really glad I did, because there's such an aura of like heaviness that just settles on you during this whole book that I would really hate to have that on me for like days or weeks drawn out. So I'm glad I got it all done, ripped it off like a band-aid, but man, was it good. Gillian Flynn just writes these incredibly nasty, manipulative, terrible characters, and I love them. Like, they're so deep, and they're bad people, but like I believe it and I like it. You know, there's people out there that are just like not friendly in general, so like I don't know, I like reading about them. It's a breath of fresh air. The plot twists actually, because I think there were a couple, absolutely got me. I remember laying in bed listening to this and I was like I can't figure out who did this or how they did it or why they did it, and I was so frustrated. I was like, usually I can work these out and usually at least get a theory or something, but I could not for the life of me like figure out until it was revealed what was happening. It was so great, and it was so dark though. Please look up trigger warnings. I don't even know if I could list them all, but it's a very, very dark, gruesome book, and but I'm glad I read it. I really loved it. And then I read The Grown Up by Gillian Flynn. This is about a woman who does a lot of odd jobs here and there, even if she's not quite qualified for them. And a woman actually comes to her and asks for her to like do a spiritual house cleaning. She thinks that her house is haunted and there's something funky going on. So this woman, you know, just wanting money, is like, oh sure, let me come to your house and I'll pretend to clean your house of ghosts and spirits. And it just kind of unravels from there. It's got some tropes that I love. I love the creepy child trope. Children are insanely terrifying, especially in like a creepy light. So that really helped. I like the dark, ominous, haunted house vibes. And this book did a really good job of kind of towing the line between, is this actually like supernatural, or is this just like a crazy mastermind killer person? You don't like find out to the end, and it's really fun. And I think it took about an hour for me to read on audiobook, and it was just a great time. I think Gillian Flynn is such a talented writer, and her twists are impeccable. This was an hour read, and there were just so many twists within this 1 hour listening period. And I loved it. And the last thriller that I'm going to talk about is The Wife Between Us. Now this seems like this would be like the stereotypical domestic thriller about the wife and the mistress and the husband and, you know, all of the drama going down between them. But it really was so much more than that. I ended up giving this one a 4 out of 5 star. I do think it reads a little bit more like literary fiction than like a thriller mystery. It kind of like, there's a twist around the 25 to 50% mark that is the big twist. Like, that's the big reveal, and then kind of like all of the cards are on the table and you just kind of read the rest of it from there. And from there on out, it really does read like literary fiction, just like a troubled marriage type book, which is fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. I just wish that it had been maybe a little bit more like thriller mystery-y, but I really did appreciate the book for how smart it was. It employed some really good narrative devices, and it did more than one. It did like a whole handful of twists and devices and things that were misleading, and I really appreciated that. I can't even imagine the brain power that went behind orchestrating this book with all of the POVs and the flashbacks, and again those like spoilery devices used I can't talk about. It was so smart. And even though I wish there was more of a big twist at the end, I really found myself enjoying it and appreciating it for like a piece of art. Next, I read two really great nonfictions. The first one was called Stiff. This book is essentially about cadavers and like the secret life of cadavers. What all happens to your body after you die. That's just like one chapter, but basically it's like everything that cadavers are used for, and it was absolutely fascinating. I give this a 5 out of 5 stars. It talks about, of course, like medical research, plastic surgery. They can be, like, cadavers can be used as crash test dummies. They can be used for like military warfare to test out weapons, which, you know, when you donate your body to science, I don't think people know that they're blowing up grandpa with grenades in the backyard. It was just a really, really fascinating look. It felt very scientific, but at the same time, there was like this funny undertone to everything. There was lots of nice puns that I appreciated, but still at the same time, like, kept a measured amount of respect for the dead. So I loved it. I feel like I learned a lot. And then I read I'll Be Gone in the Dark, which was the story of finding the Golden State Killer. Now, this is kind of like a true crime type story, but I really, really loved the narrative voice. This author has such a good, captivating way of telling stories. I really felt like it was a fiction book, the way that she was talking about her investigative journeys. It was just very engrossing. The kind of sad thing about this book, which isn't a spoiler, the author actually passed away from a medical complication before the book was completed. So her husband and one of her partners ended up finishing the book for her. And while they were finishing the book, the Golden State Killer was actually caught. And so they like they pulled the book and like revised the ending chapter, and like there was this beautiful letter at the end that the author's husband wrote to his wife, like talking about how he's been caught and like how it would mean so much to her. And it was just, it was such a cool ending. Like, it's really sad that she died, obviously, but it was super cool that he was caught before the book was completely published, and they kind of got to put that in as a caveat. And you know, some people really think that he would not have been caught if it wasn't for her own private investigating hobby. So pretty cool stuff. And the last book that I'm going to talk about today is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I don't know if I need to go into that much detail about this because everyone's been talking about this. I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid does characters in a way that no one else is or has done characters before. They are so incredibly real and raw and cringy and like lovable, and just like they're real people. Like they've got every single aspect of every single type of person there is. And I love that, and because of that, her character relationships are like on a next level. For those of you that didn't know, this book follows a band from the, well, a fictitious band from the 70s, late 60s, early 70s that broke up. They're basically kind of like a one record wonder, and they took the world by storm, and then they broke up, and nobody knows why. So this book is somebody interviewing all of the band members, getting their side of the story, and putting it all together. And the funny thing is, it reads like a non-fiction book. Like, it kind of is meant to be like this like memoir of this band, but it's fiction. It was actually really sad when I got done with the book because I really wanted to listen to these songs that they were talking about and these lyrics that they were writing. And if you listen to the audiobook, they do have the lyrics and the music for their main song, Honeycomb, at the very end. I highly recommend it for people who like character-driven novels. That's definitely what Taylor Jenkins Reid is good at. She doesn't do like a lot of like flashy plot stuff, but if you like a deep dive into characters, Taylor Jenkins Reid might just be for you. But anyways, you guys, those are some of the books that I have been absolutely loving for the past couple months. Comment down below if you've read some of those or what you have been loving. Give me some recommendations because I'm always looking for good ones. Specifically non-fiction. Like if you've got any weird, obscure knowledge, preferably like morbid. I just like really weird non-fiction stuff. So if you have any of those, drop them down in the comment section for me. I would love to check them out. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!